It takes a lot for an effective and successful leader to get to the top of an organization. It takes high curiosity and a high capacity for learning. It takes emotional intelligence. It takes technical competence. And a variety of course, other personal characteristics like fortitude and resilience and trust and honesty and compassion and so forth. But here's the interesting thing. Even with those qualities, many leaders fail at the top job of an organization once they get there. Often because they don't know how to motivate the organization, especially during times of change and transition. It's very challenging to get everybody on board in the same boat, so to speak, for that boat then to be filled with the entire organization so it can move towards its mission. That is a challenging task for leadership. Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Nelson, and I'm talking about the 5 principles in this series of effective leadership that leaders prioritize for themselves. This one is about a really significant issue which we call organizational culture. What these leaders lack, who once they get to the top cannot sustain that effective leadership, what they lack, what successful leaders, however, embody down to their very marrow, is what is called organizational intelligence. It's OQ, organizational intelligence. And to have organizational intelligence, there are multiple competencies. So let's talk about that for a few minutes. What are some of those? I won't go through all 5 of the competencies, but here are several of the most significant ones. Organizational intelligence is about understanding the atmosphere of the entire organization. And not just understanding it, but it's actually helping to cultivate that environment. Here's one of the ways to look at it. Aristotle had his rhetorical triangle. Some of you may have seen this triangle. It's made up of 3 points, obviously. This triangle, rhetorical triangle, was put together by Aristotle as the 3 most important things to keep in mind when you're trying to motivate people, when you're trying to communicate effectively, when you're trying to encourage people to get involved and participate and be engaged. Here are the 3 necessary factors. The first one is what Aristotle called ethos. Ethos. Ethos is about building credibility. It's about building trust. It's about embedding the core values of an organization into the very soil and environment of that organization. That's creating what Aristotle called ethos. It's paying attention to what I call ballast, and that is building more depth into the organization, into the people's lives. And that means you deal with character issues, with credibility, with trust, and with values. A leader who neglects ethos is a leader that will not be effective in the end. Ethos. What kind of culture, if you're a leader today, I'm asking you, what kind of culture are you creating with an ethos culture? How are you building credibility in your organization? How are you building your own credibility? And it's not just about how smart you are, with how much you know, what your technical competence is. It's also about your own emotional intelligence, but it's also beyond your emotional intelligence. It's about the people that you're working with and how you are either building them up or diminishing them. That's all about credibility and trust. Does the soil of your organization contain what I call psychological safety? The ability to be yourself, to have your authentic voice matter, to be listened to. That's what people feel in an organization where the leader has helped to shape and cultivate ethos. The second factor is pathos. Pathos is about the emotions. Pathos is about imagination. Pathos is about belonging. Successful leaders pay attention to those pieces of their soil in the environment of their organizations? What are you doing to pay attention to the emotions? That might mean, for example, that not everybody who comes to work can separate their personal from their professional life. Sometimes we think, you come to work, you got to lay aside whatever's happening in the rest of your life, and you just have to pay attention and focus in where you are right now at work. But successful and effective leaders pay attention to pathos. They allow the space for people to be themselves, to bring all of themselves, including maybe some of the challenges and some of the pains they're going through. A worker, I was on a team where one of the team members began to shed some tears, and he said, "My wife and I had another miscarriage. This is our second one." And all of a sudden that whole team looked at each other and they said, "Oh my goodness, we are so sorry. What can we do? How can we support you?" That's building pathos in the culture of that organization. So as a leader, what are you doing to pay attention to not just the emotions, but the imagination? How are you encouraging your employees to increase their imagination, to begin to dream and actually have the opportunity to work towards some of those dreams, whether it's their own professional dreams or whether it's the dream of a product that they have for the organization or whatever the dream is? Pathos pays attention to stimulating imagination and the sense of belonging. How are we connected? People leave an organization because, number one, the manager does not pay attention to their needs, and number two, they feel no connection with their fellow employees. How are you helping to create a sense of belonging? All of that is under factor number 2, pathos. And then finally, of course, you would imagine logos, Aristotle said. Logos is about building consistency. It's about learning. It's about curiosity. It's about ideas and paradigms and information and data. Most of the organizations that I've ever worked with are very high on logos. They pay a lot of attention to data and information and product development. But there's this nuance to logos that is more than just that. It's also about consistency. When you build a culture of logos, there is an atmosphere of consistency, which could mean that every time you show up at work, there's a consistent nature to how you show up. The people do not expect to see someone different. I've worked with some CEOs who showed up differently based upon whatever they were feeling. And when I interviewed some of the people that worked closely with them, they said, "We have no idea who to expect every day the leader shows up." That's not consistency. A lack of consistency breeds distrust, breeds sometimes fear and anxiety. There has to be an atmosphere of consistency, how we all show up with each other in consistent ways. There's learning. There's curiosity. What are you doing as a leader to stimulate an environment with your managers, for example, to help them stimulate the opportunity for their team members to learn, to grow in their positions, to develop their own professional worlds, and to even develop their personal lives more effectively? That's all in logos: curiosity, consistency, learning. See, here's the deal. Successful leaders are the stewards. They are the cultivators of the organizational culture. Now, I know that in some big companies there's actually a C position of people culture, chief people culture. And that's good, that's okay. But the top leader needs to be also involved in the cultivation, the stimulation of the culture and the environment of that organization. If the top leader is not involved in that process, then people begin to see a disconnect between what some of the other leaders are saying and what they think the top leader might actually be feeling or saying or facilitating. The cultivators of the organizational soil, that means they prioritize this place as a place where everyone feels fully alive and where they love to work. That word cultivation is a farming terminology, isn't it? The farmer pays attention to the soil, the environment, the fertilizing of the soil, the weeding of the soil adequately, making sure there's adequate depth to the soil so that when the seed is planted, the roots grow deep and receive their nourishment. And that depth, that ballast creates the strength and resilience so that when the sun is shining and when the wind is blowing and external environments are a bit more difficult, there is enough depth to withstand those external environment conditions. The farmer pays attention to all of this and makes sure that it happens. That's cultivation. So my question to you as a leader today is, what are you cultivating in your organization? What are the intentional steps you are taking to create this rich, fertilized soil of ethos, pathos, and logos? That's your responsibility, to pay attention and to prioritize. I invite you to begin to do some self-reflection when you're thinking about these three factors and say, how am I encouraging and in fact participating in these three ways to build a healthy, passionate, mission-driven organizational culture? And if you do, you'll be a leader that everybody wants to follow and be involved with. I guarantee it. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. See you next time.